This place is getting weird. There's nobody here. So what did I think of the Ferrania P30? I actually really liked it. It's pretty slow film at 80 ASA, and it's a little hard to meter for. In scans, it wasn't that difficult to scan, but I definitely found that classic low ISO look, very contrasty. Think like PanF, APX25, something like that. Very easy to blow out the highlights because you're trying to compensate for shadows, but still good tonality, very silvery. Prints really nice. So we'll get to some prints in just a second. Just some notes about the way that it develops. On the P30, you can't really see through here. There aren't really any edge markings. It doesn't say Ferrania or Kodak or any of those brands very well. It does say Ferrania, but it's very, very light. There's no frame numbers, and the sprocket hole shape is like regular still film. It's not like cinema film or anything kind of funky like that. The emulsion itself, it wasn't very fragile. I find with certain films, especially slow stuff like the older F-key kind of stuff, F-key 50, I'm looking at that kind of a film. Those older films, I find the emulsion to be very fragile, and when you're squeegeeing the film, it's very easy to scratch and tear bits of the emulsion off. I found with this Ferrania film that the emulsion was very resilient in that it stayed on, there wasn't any scratches or any defects in the emulsion. Overall, great film. Loved it. So let's get to the prints. So I had a chance to print about half of what I showed in the video yesterday, and I would have liked to printed everything, but it was just like fighting with getting those highlights and the whites to look correct. It's not a very easy film to wet print. I was printing a lot of this stuff at grade 1.5, and that seemed to really balance things out, but it still gave me quite a contrasty look. So let's take a look at some prints. So this is printed on, all this stuff is printed on Ilford, regular resin coated, multi-grade paper, glossy, as you can tell probably. And yeah, very, very different look than the scan. The shadows are quite crunched, and the blacks are very rich and very, very black. This was printed at a grade 2.5. That's that one. So here's the second one here. Again, basically printing for these whites just to kind of have them blocked a little bit because we have a lot of zone 9 and 10 stuff in here. So we were just trying to get a little bit more into these whites into zone 9. I'm not a huge fan of like super white whites. If you look close enough, there's some detail in here, it's just not a lot. So that's perfect. So this printed good. I didn't do any dodging or burning on this, and this was printed grade 1.5, and everything was printed grade 1.5 moving forward. So this is kind of how it prints. It's still, again, very contrasty, and with a little bit of work, I think that you could have pulled a little bit more out of here. It was just pretty much like one test strip, straight print, done. Just because I was trying to get through as much as I possibly could. This one here, I think this is probably one of the best prints of the entire roll, to be honest, in that printing section. So this, again, grade 1.5, and I ended up doing my print and exposing for the bottom part here, and then I doubled for the sky and just burned in the sky a little bit here as well. It adds a lot of detail and a lot of dimension to this shot, and I love the contrast, and I love the detail that's in here. It's great. This one, I had a lot of problems printing. The whites in the ice were kind of blowing out a little too much, so I ended up pre-flashing this just to try to bring the whites down because I found that they were getting a little, like, there was detail there. I knew that there was detail there, especially from the scan, but I just wanted to kind of bring that detail back. Again, this one, I think this one is probably the closest to the scan in terms of tonality and the overall flatness within and detail within the shot. I still like this shot. You do have your blacks in here and your whites here, so this basically all kind of falls into where the contrast should be. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward shot. Detail's nice, sharpness is good. Nothing much more to say for that one. So this one here, printed pretty good. It's very high contrast. I was basically printing to kind of get these whites down in this area here to be a little bit darker and have a little bit more detail in here, but I kind of feel like it might have been a little blown out on the film. And I really like the way that the Ferrania renders the ice. It's very silvery, got a very high silver content, and it just looks super silvery, super contrasty. It's got a lot of detail there, and there's not a lot of grain, so you get to really see a lot of the detail that comes through in the ice and those areas with a lot of high detail contrasts and stuff. It just looks great. So this is the last print I did. This is kind of my fuck it print. I just printed it. It was the last print of the day. I wasn't really feeling like standing in the darkroom anymore, so I did a little bit of pre-flashing on this one, again, to try to get some more, knock these whites down in here and try to get a little bit more detail in there, but there's just nothing. And it was just like fighting with it, just didn't feel like messing with it. So it definitely could be darker. A little bit more time doing my main exposure would be nice, just to get a little bit more contrast here, because you see a lot of shadow detail. The edge markings here aren't quite black. So again, could be darker. So this isn't like the best print. Not super huge fan of it. That's as far as I got, and I never bothered to finish printing it. So that's that. Those are the prints. I definitely have to say this one probably stands out of the whole roll. I have some recommendations. I mean, this P30, I really recommend it. It would be really nice for Ferrania to make 120 version, because I think the amount of silver that's in this and the contrast and the way that this looks would just be amazing in 120. I think when they're doing and developing their 120 films for the color slide stuff that they're working on, it'd be great if they could just knock off a batch of this stuff, because it would just be great. It would be really great too to shoot some portraits of this stuff. I think the skin tones would be really great. That's basically the only thing that I didn't really get to test. Since I kind of shoot street and a lot of this stuff was just wandering around Ontario Place looking for anything or basically any human interaction. Shooting in the wintertime in Toronto is very hard. There's not a lot of people doing anything. Everyone's just kind of bundled up, and you can see that there's a lot of just nothing happening. So it's very difficult to find good shots, but I definitely would love to shoot some portraits with this stuff, and that's probably what I'll do with this and with this roll here. But definitely want to give that a try. Again, I was developing this in Rodinal, 1 to 50. I can't remember the time. I'll post it up here. If you want to give that a try, totally recommend it. It develops great and it looks wonderful. But I definitely think that if you are printing this stuff, you could definitely go with something like D76 or HC110, just something to give you a little bit of grain solubility, just to kind of smooth everything out. Might help. There is a little bit of graininess in this, but again, that could be from the high accutance of the rodent elk. It's up to you. I was shooting this in a Leica M5 with Voigtlander 50mm f1.5 and also a Zeiss Bio on 35mm f2. I really enjoyed shooting this film, and I hope Ferrania makes more of this film. I think, just to take it from alpha to beta to a real thing, I think it would be just wonderful as a black and white line, because there really isn't anything out there like that other than Pan F. Something to consider, but I think that some fresh, slow, super silvery film would be wonderful. Hope you've enjoyed. We'll see you in the next one. And yeah, Ferrania P30. Thumbs up.